And after becoming a lawyer, he went to South Africa and suffered prejudice and hate through the Christian religion there. And he came to the conclusion that this kind of prejudice and hate is not what religion is about. Religion is about love and compassion and not hating people. And he realized that none of the religions were perfect, that imperfect human beings have translated religion imperfectly. And so there are many mistakes there. But what we need to do is to try to find the wisdom from every one of them and to incorporate that in our own lives so that we can enrich our own lives and become better human beings. And that's what defined his life. And whenever people asked him, "What religion do you belong to?" he used to say, "I am a Hindu, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, I'm a Sikh, I'm a Parsi, I'm everybody." Because I respect and love all the religions of the world. And his prayers every day included prayers from all the different religions of the world. And we used to sit out in the open grounds and invite people from all the different faiths to come together and pray together. And so I was brought up in the same tradition, and I also don't consider myself to be of any one religion. I am in all the religions, and all the religions are part of me. But I also was fortunate, and in many ways I would say that my life was defined by the 2 years that I spent with my grandfather between the age of 12 and 14, the last 2 years of his life. And I grew up in South Africa, where there was tremendous amount of hate and prejudice because of people's color. And I suffered a lot of this humiliation because I was not of the right color. I was beaten up, humiliated, bullied. Everything had happened to me, and I was very angry. And I was seeking eye for an eye justice. I wanted to fight back. And that is when my parents took me to India. And the first lesson grandfather said, you got to learn about understanding anger and being able to use that energy positively. He said anger is like electricity. It is just as useful and just as powerful, but only if we use it intelligently. But it can be just as deadly and destructive if we abuse it. So just as we channel electrical energy and bring it into our lives and use it for the good of humanity, we must learn to channel anger in the same way so that we can use that energy for the good of humanity rather than abuse the energy and cause death and destruction. He suggested that I write an anger journal. He said every time you get angry, don't act on it, don't do anything that you are going to regret later on. But write the journal. But write the journal with the intention of finding a solution to the problem, and then commit yourself to finding a solution. Now that is very important, because today a lot of people tell me they have been writing an anger journal for a long time, but it hasn't really helped them. Because every time they go back and read the journal, they are just reminded of the incident and they get angry all over again. Because they pour their anger out into the journal, and that doesn't help. We have to find a solution to the problem and commit ourselves to finding that solution. I did this for many years, and I must say it helped me considerably in learning how to deal with my anger positively and constructively. But he also taught me about his philosophy and the importance of his philosophy. which is very important today when we are all talking about peace, working for peace, wanting peace in the world, and yet we are not being able to achieve it. And that is because in many ways we have been going around the wrong way to achieve peace. We think that peace is the absence of war, that if there is no war or there is no fighting in the streets, that we are living in peace. But that is not peace at all. He taught me one day when I was coming back from school and I had thrown away a little pencil, and I was so sure that grandfather would give me a new pencil when I asked him for one. But that evening when I met grandfather and asked him for a new pencil, instead of giving me one, he subjected me to a lot of questions. He wanted to know how the pencil became small and where did I throw it away and why did I throw it away. And then he told me to go out and look for it. And I said, "You must be joking." He said, "You don't expect me to look for a little pencil in the dark?" He said, "Oh yes, I do. Here's a flashlight." And he sent me out with the flashlight to look for this pencil, and I think I must have spent about 2 hours searching for it. And when I finally found it and brought it to him, he said, "Now I want you to sit here and learn two very important lessons." The first lesson is that even in the making of a simple thing like a pencil, we use a lot of the world's natural resources, and when we throw them away, we are throwing away the world's natural resources, and that is violence against nature. And the second lesson is that because in an affluent society we can afford to buy all these things in bulk, we overconsume the resources of the world, and because we overconsume them, we are depriving people elsewhere of these resources, and they have to live in poverty. And that is violence against humanity. And that was the first time I realized that all of these things that we do every day, consciously and unconsciously, it's become so much a part of our life and our nature that we don't even realize it's violence. Every time we hate somebody, or we have prejudices against somebody, or we look down on somebody, or we judge somebody, or we waste resources and throw away resources. You know, it was painful for me to read in the New York Times last week that in the United States alone, we throw away $120 billion worth of food every year. $120 billion worth of food. Now just imagine how many people could have been fed with that food. And yet we do it so unconsciously that we don't even think this is violence. And all of these things are violence. He made me draw a genealogical tree of violence. He said the only way you will learn what this philosophy is about is by understanding violence itself. And he made me draw this family tree with violence as the grandparent and physical violence and passive violence as the two branches. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze and examine everything that I had experienced during the day. Things that I may have done to other people, or people may have done to me, or everything that I may have read about, or whatever it was, all of that had to be analyzed and examined and put on that tree. Now, if it was the kind of violence where we use physical force, that would go under physical violence. But if it's the kind of violence where we don't use any physical force, and yet we hurt people, and there are thousands of ways we do this. Sometimes we don't even see the people, and yet we hurt them. The way we discriminate against people, or the way we look down on people or judge people, and the divisions that we have created between people, religious differences, economic differences, social, cultural, political, all these differences, where we build a wall between that person and ourselves. that's the potential for conflict. And all of these things are passive violence. And when I began to do this introspection, I was amazed that within a few months, I was able to fill up a whole wall in my room with acts of passive violence. And that is when he explained the connection between the two. That we commit passive violence all the time, every day, consciously and unconsciously. And that generates anger in the victim, and the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. Because that is what justice has come to mean today. We want eye for an eye. We want to make somebody pay for what they have done. And that is not justice. That is revenge. In the philosophy of non-violence, it's not punishment that is important, but penance. And I've been talking a lot about this to many community groups everywhere. And they all said that we human beings are naturally violent people. There's nothing we can do. We are just born violent. And I don't agree with that. If we are naturally violent people, we wouldn't need martial arts institutes and military academies to teach us how to fight and kill. We should be born with those instincts. But the fact is that we need all these things to teach us how to fight, and so violence is a learned experience. And the way we perpetuate this is the way we parent our children. Every time we punish our children or threaten them with punishment when they misbehave, we are planting the first seeds of violence in their minds. We are telling them that anybody who misbehaves must be punished. So in a non-violence household, and I was brought up in a non-violence household by my parents, we were not punished when we misbehaved. And believe me, we did misbehave. My parents did penance instead. Depending on how serious the offense was, they would fast for a day or 2 days. They would sit there at the dining table, they would feed us, but they would tell us that we were not good parents and therefore we have to do this penance. And through that, they taught us the value of nonviolence. So I could go on speaking to you on this subject, but I do want to realize that there are many other speakers after me. But I want to share one last story with you before I conclude. It was a story that my grandfather used to be very fond of telling me, of an ancient Indian king who once became very curious about the meaning of peace. And he invited all the intellectuals in his kingdom to come and explain. Everybody came there and did their best, but nobody could satisfy the king. And one day there was an intellectual from another town who came on a visit, and the king asked him to explain. And he said, the only person who can give you a satisfactory answer is an old sage who lives outside your kingdom. But he is so old that he cannot come to you. You will have to go to him and ask him the question. And so the next day the king went to the sage and asked him the meaning of peace. And the sage quietly went to the back of the house, came back with a grain of wheat and placed that grain of wheat on the king's palm and said, here is your answer. And of course the king didn't know what a grain of wheat had to do with peace. So he quietly clutched that grain of wheat, went back to his palace, found a little gold box, and he placed that grain of wheat in the box. And every day he would open the box to look for an answer and couldn't find any answers. So when this intellectual came back on a return visit, the king asked him to explain. And he said, it's very simple. He said, as long as you keep this grain of wheat in this box, nothing is going to happen. It will eventually rot and perish, and that will be the end of the story. But if you had allowed this grain of wheat to interact with all the elements, it would sprout and grow, and very soon you could have a whole field of wheat. And that is the meaning of peace. That if somebody has found peace and if they keep it locked up in their hearts, it will perish with them. But if they let it interact with all the elements, it would grow, and very soon we could have a whole world of peacemakers. So I am here today to give you the grain of wheat that I got from my grandfather, and I hope that you won't let it rot and perish, but let it interact so that all of us together can make this world a better place for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gandhi. Anger as energy, violence as waste and discrimination. Violence we perpetuate unconsciously, and peace we bottle up consciously. So we should change that. I'm now delighted to invite onto the stage Shayda Safapour, who is a member of the Baha'i faith, and she will be talking about the Baha'i community, who she represents in many gatherings in the Chicago area.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shayda Safapour, and I am so honored and delighted to be with you today. I want to express my appreciation to Balwant Hansra and the Sikh Religious Society of Chicago for this incredible opportunity to be with you and for organizing this wonderful gathering. I am pleased to speak with a group of people who have come together today for a spiritual purpose, a meeting of spirits and intellects who are committed to the betterment of humankind and peace and unity in this world. And it's in this spirit that I hope we can explore together some of the new insights and potentials present in this era that can lead us to peace. I am particularly glad that we've come to speak not about the personal, but to focus on the world. The world has shrunk to a neighborhood, and yet we are looking at it as though it's in separate parts with separate people. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, taught, "Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens." Today's topic, service, a pathway to peace, is very much what Baha'is all over the world are focusing on. We believe serving humanity is an important element to achieving peace. Baha'u'llah taught, "Think ye at all times of rendering service to every member of the human race. In this way, the light of divine guidance will shine forth, and the blessings of God will cradle all mankind. For love is light, no matter where it is abode, and hate is darkness, no matter where it makes its nest." Abdul-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, says service is worship and prayer. He writes, "This is worship, to serve mankind and to minister to the needs of the people." He goes on to point out, "Know thou that nothing will benefit thee in this life save supplication and invocation unto God. Service in his vineyard, and with a heart full of love, to be in constant servitude unto him. But how do we put these spiritual principles into action? How are we to put ourselves in a constant mode of service? How can we authentically, earnestly serve humankind, serve those who are different than us? Baha'u'llah teaches that the purpose of the coming of the prophets of God throughout history is to help bring about change and help carry us forward in an ever-advancing civilization. We believe there's just one creator, which we call by different names, and that religion is one. It is renewed from time to time to help us evolve, to help us with the needs of the time and era we live in. Humankind has never been left without spiritual foundation and spiritual guidance. And it's from this standpoint that Baha'is believe in the validity of all the religions. We believe that the Baha'i faith is the most recent chapter of progressive revelation, and that in the future, a new prophet will come, because there's constant change and evolution in all fields of existence, be it scientific or religious. The Baha'i faith teaches we are living in the era of the fulfillment of the prophecies of the past, that the promise of world peace is now to be realized. Baha'u'llah states that all nations become one in faith and all men as brothers, that the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men should be strengthened, that diversity of religion should cease and differences of race be annulled. Yet so it shall be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come. However, there is a challenge thrown to us. Baha'u'llah states, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. Its unity is firmly established. So the motivating power in the New World Order to establish peace is the establishment of unity. According to the Baha'i teachings, the three onenesses upon which peace will be built are the oneness of God, oneness of religion, and oneness of humankind. When we realize our true nature, our spiritual reality, that we are one, and when we are exposed to spiritual teachings, this will in turn give us a sense of world citizenship and instill in us a love, an urge to serve one another. As the Baha'i writings tell us, this is a new cycle of human power. All horizons of the world are luminous, and the world will indeed become as a garden and a paradise. Let us break down the man-made barriers and prejudices which have historically separated the various peoples of the world, and let us establish peace through spiritual unity. This is certainly in our power, and our presence here today is a testament to our commitment to serving the cause of world peace. Thank you.
Service as worship and unity of all mankind. That was a wonderful message. Winston Churchill once wrote to a friend. He said, "I'm sorry this letter is so long. I didn't have time to write a shorter one. I'm going to make a humble appeal to the speakers that if we can borrow a minute or two from each of you, we will be back on schedule. So I'm sure your wisdom will be greater the fewer the words. So I would now like to invite Ms. Asayo Horibe, who's representing the Buddhist faith, and she is the President Emeritus of the Buddhist Council of the Midwest and Trustee Emeritus of the Council for the Parliament of World Religions.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you again. I see so many of my friends from years and years of traveling and being with you. Thank you. I would like to share with you a blessing that we learn when we're in Sunday school. And this is something about a discussion I also had with the Dalai Lama, that people learn how to behave at a very early age. We learn this in Sunday school, and it is the golden chain of love. I'm a part of the world's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I must keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will say beautiful words. I will do beautiful deeds, knowing that on what I do now depends my happiness and misery. May every link in the world's golden chain of love become bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. I want to share with you an incident that happened with me. I was with my daughter and my granddaughter, and we were at a shopping center, and we were having lunch. And a woman came by with her 3 children, and this little boy was hitting on his brother who was in the shopping cart. And my granddaughter looked at that and said, "Stop that! That's not nice." My granddaughter was 3 years old. I was so proud of her. If we had learned all of this when we were at home with our parents, to learn to stop things that are not nice and to be good to one another. Is that so hard? I share my pride of my granddaughters, and I know that you share the pride of your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, because you know that you are practicing what you have learned from your parents and grandparents. Thank you so much for this wonderful occasion, and thank you so much for allowing me to see many of my dear friends again.